and security will give you a double-fold impact when there is a breach or a stolen or a kind of hack taking place. And to safeguard them, we need a one-hour good process. So here, what I'm going to give you is a kind of a 5-dimension view, where an approach which you can sophisticate and put it in any of the system in order to upgrade your security level of it. So what is this 5D approach? 5D approach is a simple approach where we start how to safeguarding your security, starting from requirement to the design, then to development, then testing, and then a very important area is regression. So in many of the forum you've been seeing why actually he named it as 5D, and that question always remains there. I basically gave this as a 5D approach or a 5-dimension approach is because this approach is not binded to any of the SDIC. So if you look at it, any SDICs like waterfall or agile or anything, we definitely follow requirement design and development and testing. So these processes are already there, and as we have a product life cycle and so on, definitely we'll be having some kind of regression. So all these 5 dimensions has been covered or one or other way in terms of any kind of SDLCs. So binding them directly to that model will give you an easy, feasible, approach to use this technique. So it can be used in any model of Agile, V model, or any spiral. Most probably, people highly start using waterfall and Agile. So most of my points will be pointing out to how to best use in terms of waterfall and Agile. So let's start with a requirement as a first dimension. So when we talk about requirement, requirement is very clear in waterfall. When we talk about Agile, it is a product backlog or a story. However, each company wants to streamline or put into it. So I would highly recommend some of 4 important techniques which can be used at this requirement stage. Those are training and workshop. There might be many questions which is open, like why training has been coming towards requirement, or how do you try to merge these 2 things. So this is some of my experience and studies showed that by binding a requirement to a training at a requirement phase will give you a very clear picture, like what needs to be trained and where he needs to be trained and what are the things he needs to know, and so on. So by having that part in the mind at a requirement stage, you should be very clear in going ahead and delivering the product. So that is why I said training and workshop binded to this model. Of course, it's not necessary that you need not have a training before. You can have a number of trainings, but only thing is at requirement stage, we should be able to benchmark and say that training. We will have a slide, so we'll come to know like what it is and so on. And the next approach is trend analysis, and of course, you have been heard about policies and standards and compliance. We're talking very specific in terms of Agile. As I said, your security should be your backlog item, starting from the product backlog. I know you develop any kind of system, at least it has some or other way where it has to be grounded with security, either in terms of data breach or in terms of credential breach, or higher in terms of financial breach and so on. So at any point of time, you take any requirement of any product backlog. So a security should be a part of it, and having that as a separate security backlog will be able to help you very conveniently. And once you're able to put that, definitely it will be a part in terms of sprint backlog, and then we should be able to follow any of this dimension very easily. So the very important key takeaway is please ensure that when you are in Agile, when you are thinking about securities, and definitely my data clearly showed security is important, always enforce and make it ensure that you have a security backlog in your product backlog such that you can drive to solutions. So we talked about training. So let's understand more about training. One sec. Okay, any of the slides will be shared, so if you're not able to see all the data on screen, so you should not be worried. So what you see on a screen is percentage of vulnerability that is usually get impacted on a a baseline of an industrial trend, and the list of here what you see is a vulnerability at a various threat. Now, seeing this graph, it says that 55% of an usual based applications get attacked with cross-site scripting as a vulnerability, and 53% and so on is what the other vulnerabilities attacks takes place. So if you look at this graph, it will not convey information unless and until you know something on a training mode. So let's understand what exactly it is. So starting as a security, let's understand what is penetration testing is all about. A penetration testing is a method of evaluating the security of an application. It's nothing but involving an active analysis of a system to find out the security vulnerability. So when we say actually analyzing of security vulnerability, we should understand what is vulnerability. I know some of the audience would know very well on these areas. So some of the audience is they might be newly hearing about it. So that is how the training model will clearly bind to here. So vulnerability is nothing but it is a weakness which allows the attacker to reduce any system information assurance. So any system which is able to breach or able to hack or able to get attacked, okay, so that weak area is called vulnerability. So what you're seeing here is these are the vulnerabilities that various attacker uses, and these are the usual trend of percentages and so on. To know the latest trends, let's wait for it. And in this, you can also see the attacker uses various methods. So that is called vector. So vector is nothing but a path or a mean in which the attacker uses to crack or hack the vulnerability. So any vulnerability I want to hack it, I have one kind of method, and by using that method, I should be able to hack the vulnerability. So when we say pen testing or when we say application, what we do it is we have a huge list of vulnerability to be tested. Each vulnerability will have huge list of vector to be tested, and covering each vector with a vulnerability on each flow is what a properly called penetration testing is all about. And why is this important at a very early stage is whenever a coder or a developer start developing any of his code or any of his code piece, usually there are many inbuilt up API applications or validation which you need to take care, which one or other way start protecting in terms of various vulnerability and vectors. So more he knows about what vulnerability and what vector he is trying to protect, he will be more principally able to use it and able to get the best code out of it. And some of the early stages in a stages where they are reading the PRD or they are understanding the product requirement and so on, understand what kind of attacks can take place and asking them relevant questions, and at that level also will be able to help it. So at any stage when you look at it, training becomes very important. So I put purposely this slide to one, if there is any people who are not knowing this terminology, as to know, because most of my talk will be binded to it. And in terms of any project, if you do not know the basic terminology of security and also basic terminology of an application, what it needs to be grounded, then it becomes very difficult for him to be, code the best code piece or to chart out the best product requirement and so on. So coming down to the second part of dimension number one, that is trend analysis. So this trend analysis is very interesting part. So when we talk about testing a pen testing, or when we talk about gowning a product, there are huge amount of vulnerability which we need to test. There are huge amount of vector which need to be tested, and of course there are various flows. Very simple is, if I have a 10 flows and 10 vulnerability needs to be tested, and each vulnerability is having 10 vector, then you have 10 into 10. So that is the amount of testing which we need to do. So in order to decide what is approach we need to do a pen testing, or what is an approach we need to gown our product, or what is an approach we need to go ahead in order to safeguard our product, and where is our strength and weakness. This is a good activity which we can carry out. There is a forum called OAPS, that is Open Web Application Security Project. Just type in a Google OAPS, you should be able to get it. This is a forum which does a lot of study in terms of security, especially in terms of web application, and gives also trend saying that, hey, what is an industrial trend as of today in terms of it. They release out top 10 vulnerabilities, and each by dimension years, that is 2010, 2013. We also have 2008 and so on. And gives out, this is the latest trend at which the industry is moving and our hacker is moving. By capturing this trend and understanding what are the vulnerabilities that the industry is moving, then you can also do a study with respect to your own data. I hope most of the team will have one or other way of doing pen testing or doing a security testing or having a team and doing testing it. So go back to your system and find out what are the data available, and then find out what vulnerability causes me more in terms of my application or my product or my industry and so on. And then get a chart of data where you to show you that X vulnerability is causing 25% in my industry or my product and so on. Once you have this graph, and once you know your trend analysis of what is the industry trend, by amalgamating both the industry trend and the bug trend analysis of your own company, you can come out with the trend analysis of your own company, and then says that, hey, these are the areas where I need to be more well protected. These are the areas I need to take care in very early beginning of my life cycle. These are the areas where I need to design and develop some control solutions or a framework which can protect better. These are the areas where I need to test more, and these are the areas where my leakage is more. And some of them would have been using some basic base framework. So any top vulnerability of which has been declared from OAPS might not be the vulnerability which you have been facing as an HIPA stage. So in those cases, it gives you very clear trend that you can rearrange your own trend and make a charter or a group or a categories levels, saying that, oh, this is my level one where I'm seeing breach, where industry is also moving in this breach category, and even my data of my own company or my own product data also is showing the same trend. So I will be able to concentrate on this more and so on. By keeping this trend analysis in your factor, if you're new to a project, if you're starting it very early, start with your OAPS top 10, then you slowly get the data of yours, then you can start merging it. And in that way, you will get one or other way a trend analysis report. By using trend analysis report, you can strategize your pen testing and also your design solutions, security design solutions, and so on. I basically put this in a requirement phase because if you already have it, you can take this data and analyze and put it in a front end requirement and say that these are the weakest area. We need to develop some solutions and propose that in a design. And similarly, if you have this data, you can also plan your sprint or your testing phase in a different strategy manner, such that you need to test on these weak areas and so on. Coming to the next part on requirement is policies and standards. Always plan for your security in upfront. Always have some base plan, base policies, base standards in place that will be able to help you. Usually company has various guidelines and standards. Most of the companies, they have data classification standards which will clearly say what data, how I need to handle it. If it's an bank or financial data, how to handle it, where to store, what is the area in which I can store it, what is the area in which I can pass the data, what data I can make it as confidential, non-confidential, and so on. And most of the companies, if they have vendor, they have vendor policies, and it is better to mention what needs to be shared with vendor, what is an opportunities in the vendors, and what should not be done in vendor interactions and so on. And that needs to be well grounded in requirement phase as per the vendor, what you are trying to map it and so on. And similarly, if you have employee policies, what are the data which has been accessed by what kind of employees, and how it has been able to use, where the employee can access it. If even I'm storing it in a log, how much the data is accessed by what kind of employee, that needs to be well known. So grounding the employee policy well to all employees, and also parallelly binding them to a data classification standards. For example, if I'm handling a PCI data and it's a sensitive data, it should not be logged in a logger. So that we can be very specific in terms of data classification. And who has a log access, that can be very specific in terms of employee policies. And that can be very clearly brought it. The employees policy becomes very important because most of the researchers and research data shows that lot of breaches have taken place by inside but not by outside employee. Even Oracle Corporation reported that 80% of Oracle security data breach has taken place by inside employees and not from outside. Similarly, some more study of data, it also shows that 64% of data is basically from employer or former employees who've been sharing a code or sharing a data, or casually or formally, or in terms of knowingly and unknowingly in a different manner in which the data is being shared, and that causes the breach. So keeping all the stats in mind, understanding even though you are developing your own product or you have a product in a company, what the product is logging and what the product is data is accessible to whom, and how this can be safeguarded should also be thought in one angle of security. Apart from that, when we develop your product, always do a risk assessment of your product, saying that where does it stand in terms of risk, whether it is a high-risk product, whether it is a low-risk product in terms of security. If in case a breach happens, what will be a huge loss, where does a loss takes place, and keeping that assessment in place, you can plan other planned ground activities in terms of design, testing, and other third-party vendor testing and so on. So that will give you very clear up in front, saying that, hey, this is the area which is very, very high at risk. We need to be well cautioned in each and every stages from starting from the design and so on. And keeping whatever the risk assessment you are doing it, well publishing in terms of a requirement phase will be very helpful, because each and every person who is involved in product development, either it's a QA engineering or a PM or a person who is reviewing it or a legal activity who's been involved, should clearly know where does the risk stands of the product, and what is the level of risk of the product, what we are looking at it, and so on. The other very important point is compliance. Now most of the industries, when we develop a product, fall on one or other compliances and so on. So knowing about the compliance, at least at a very high level, is very, very important. So let's see a simple example here. So what you see here is a credit card transaction done, and if someone who's able to look at it very carefully, this is something done it in terms of KFC, and they know it is in Bangalore, and it is very clear it is in somewhere in CMS road. So it is somewhere in local it is happening, and in this transaction there is a compliance breach. Can anyone tell me what is a breach, or can keep a hands up or something where they can say that? Okay, I understand. So I know some of them knows it and some of them who doesn't know. There is a compliance breach saying that a credit card number should not be fully visible during any point of a printable activity of any e-commerce transaction or any kind of a financial transaction. So what is happening in this bill or a report is the credit card number is fully visible, so that is a breach. As per the law and as per the governance, there are various country laws which bounded to PCIs, states that maximum of 4 to 5 digit is only exposable as part of the card number, and all other numbers should be masked. Unfortunately, the expiry date is masked and so on, but you can see the various areas where even in our day-to-day activities, you can see there is a lot of breach happening, which is a compliance breach, which is a huge breach, but still we go ahead. So knowing about the compliance not only will help you in terms of safeguarding your product, also in terms of a day-to-day activity, saying that, hey guys, how can I safeguard in terms of day-to-day activity? How can I be more secure and so on? So to know some importance on compliances, these are some of the few compliance lists. I'm not covering entirely, so because this session will not be able to enough to compare a complete compliance list. But some of the basic compliance list which we need to understand is the very important list is a PCIDSS complaint. So people who don't know what it is PCIDSS, it's nothing but Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. So this is a basic standard which has been put forth from the one of the top-rated bank, and they came together and then say that, hey, we defined a standard where we can secure all our card-related activities. And this card standard has 12 requirements which we need to be compliant at any e-commerce and financial institutes of any system which is using any kind of transaction or any kind of storage. And what you see here is a breach as per the PCIDSS complaints, saying that they are showing the visibilities of and a card number. So I know reading the entire 12 requirement, understanding the deep of a requirement might not be possible, but understanding there exists a PCIDSS and the basic norms of PCIDSS is very, very important in order to, pace on. People who have been working in a sector like e-commerce, financial, and so on, they should at least know there exists a PCIDSS and the basic norms of the PCIDSS complaints. And especially in terms of activities like requirement jotting or a product requirement or sprint cycles or in a story formations, if you are being very specific in terms of a product, please bind them directly to the PCIDSS and then be more specific, saying that these data needs to be masked and it's as per the PCIDSS. That gives you very clear indications that this requirement becomes important, and there is also an explicit requirement and so on. Usually requirement saying that it should be compliant to PCIDSS is very, very a large way of declaring it. Okay, so as an area as possible, please be more specific in declaring the compliances and what needs to be related in terms of your product requirement and so on. Similarly, if you are in health sector, HIPA is an Health Insurance Probability and Accountability Act. That is a very huge compliance which needs to be compliant in order to reduce healthcare fraud and abuse, especially in potential of confidentiality and data theft and so on. So if you are related to HIPA, you should be at least knowing what is HIPA and a basic requirement of HIPA in order to safeguard your product, and understanding that in a very early stage in terms of requirement before exactly you start coding or designing is very important, because that gives you very clear visibilities that where and what are the data which I need to be protected. Some might be able to substantially balance between usability and security, so you will be able to give the best judge out of it. The other standard is BS 7799. This is nothing but ISO 1799, which is basically organization security standard, which is brought in place effectively to make security management practice better. What they followed is simple PDCA Act, that is Plan, Do, Check Act model. There is various activities which need to be planned and safeguard, and we need to be check that with the various security aspects of it, and that needs to be compliant. They give BS77 certifications, and these best practices are very, very well used. Most of the UK-based companies will be binded to it. On the left, what you see is some of the breaches which is taking place in HIPA. We have various sector of percentage of breaches coming from data compromising by a hacker, data from the authorization from the patients and so on. Some of the hack would have been taken place unknowingly, but some of the hack would have been purposely been targeted and so on. But by complying with an HIPA, we should be able to safeguard all this sector and reduce these numbers. And what you see on your left is also various standards binded to various UK models and so on. So these standards are very, very important when you are trying to, prioritize the product based on the areas and so on. And knowing them, what is the base norms of the compliance is very important. I know reading deep inside a complaint and then being a complaint expert will not be possible, but at least to know what the complaint states and what are the major, norms of the complaints is very, very important. Similarly, we have ISO 27001, which is also a kind of enhancement to the BS77 they also follow PDCA Act. And we also have SOX complaints, which is basically in terms of a financial institute where they follow, which is very heavily related to the auditors and corporate world, in order to say that what kind of financial transaction taken place and how do you relate the transaction with what kind of people and how do you authenticate that and so on. So at least when you are playing in terms of health and you are trying to do an e-commerce, you should at least know the basic of the compliance of PCIDSS and HIPA. So having known it, so these are some of do and don'ts, especially targeted on dimension number 1. Be more specific in terms of security requirement. For example, mask your credit card informations, okay, but do not store your sensitive information. If someone knows it, you can just go to the first page of your PCIDSS and DSS compliance. There is a good table which clearly says what is the sensitive data, what needs to be stored, yes and no kind of table. So anything when you are developing a first and foremost product of your e-commerce world, better to put the table in front and then give them a very clear picture in a requirement phase, saying that, hey guys, this is what we need to do. And that will able to help you to stop any kind of breach taking place in design and so on. And if you are an agile, definitely ensure that there is a security block. And when you are doing in user stories, ensure that your story is complete only when some basic security requirement has been complete or a security story has been complete. I know at each and every sprint delivery takes place, it is said, as per the principles of a sprint, it is said to be a complete product which comes out as a sprint delivery. When we say complete product, it should also be complete in terms of security. That is what we need to be ensured in terms of your agile systems. And in terms of trend, always please know where is your strength, where is your weakness. That will be very clearly able to judge you, saying that where I should concentrate more, where I should concentrate in terms of design and so on. In terms of don'ts, never ever assume that there is a fact which has already been assumed by the developer or a designer or by the tester and so on. Be more specific. Do not complete your sprint without having a security story. Keep something based on security with respect to your story completion. That will give you at least to say that, hey, what needs to be thought in terms of security in this story and so on. So in a higher case, when you are completing an entire product, we'll at least have some security storage covered, which will be able to bind it to securities. So coming down to dimension number 2, design. Now, design is again very, very important model. As you see in my approach, as you keep going down towards various dimension, you see the number of approach decreases, but the approach intensity increases. But as a number of approach decreases, you more techniques and methods you follow in a very early stage, you will be able to block any kind of security issues or concerns which are coming in an early stage. So that even talks in terms of normal, like a shift left or however we want to take into considerations and so on. So in a design stage, coming down from the bottom to top, as in any product or any base of a company, you should have some basic security controls and solution in place. If you don't have one, you should start at least having a base control. You can start it with a base. We'll see some more information on that. And then you should at least have a kind of security design review. I know design review itself in certain base of company might be crunched or not be taking place. So keeping a review in terms of a security angle is very important, because as you see, one fold is breach and the other trend is keep increasing, and the other fold is your compliances and other things also plays a very important role. So at a early stage, very simply in terms of a review, we can catch many issues which can be stopped before coding and so on. And of course, following a threat modeling is also a best practices which can be helped. I can give you a technique in which you can follow it. So in terms of security controls and solutions, use centralized security framework. Always develop a single security framework where we can share across a different project or different product, and you can leverage the utilization of the any solutions to any product and so on. This also gives you one more capabilities. Any issue found in product A can be addressed in a security framework, and that will be solved in product B. And any new trend which you see in industry can be directly fixed in one single place that can be impacted in, that will have its impact on product A and B, which will give you a leverages. And similarly, if you're talking about project also, we can have impact. So in that way, we should be able to give a more coverage and a more protection by having one single phase solutions, and it can be driven by a separate team, or it can be effort wise can be shared and so on. Or use some of the standard frameworks. I can give you some of the standard frameworks. OApps, as I said, is a very huge forum. They have huge amount of best practices and so on. One among the best practices this is ES API. ES API is nothing but Enterprise Security API. This is a free open source, and this is majorly an open source API which is targeted for web-based security controls. They have a control for Java J2EE, extensively used. Many companies are using it in Java J2EEs. They have it for .NET. They have it for PHP. So these are APIs where you can just start using it, start protecting any of your vulnerabilities like XSS and so on. Not only that, Java itself provides a Java security enterprise versions. They have an enterprise version for cryptographies. You can use JCA or JCE. Especially, they have a lot of various methodologies where you can protect your cryptography in better. And in terms of authentication and authorization, you can use JAS model. It's a predefined model which is very well thought and drilled down. Many lessons learned have been put in JAS models. So if you're in a Java platform, these framework can directly be able to bind it. And we have much more. And if you are looking in terms of one is using it in terms of to protect the application, other using it in terms of protecting policies and standards. If you look at it, most of the people think using a log and logging everything in a log is appropriate. But as per the security standards, logging has its own standard, and complaints also binds to it. So use a predefined loggers, either a log4j or Apache or Java ITIL, or the best in fact is you can use ES API logging factors. That gives you very clear control, like what needs to be logged, where you can log it in what areas, especially if you're logging the data in a QA environment in order to do more debugging, and you're not logging all the data inside production environment, controlling in a better fashion, and also controlling in terms of the compliance factors in order to see that you don't breach most of the thing. The most common mistakes we see it is most of the sensitive data as per the PCI complaints getting logged in logger, data getting logged in logger saying that, hey, who is going to have an access or who is going to log it? This is only for debugging. Please always look at it in other manner, in other angle, that there is other employees who is trying to have the access to it, and there are still different access levels, so they can take the data and start breaching the data, start cooking the data and come back. And as a company, you should also have a DOS attack controls. This control is very, very important. You should have somewhere a pattern to judge, saying that what amount of request I should be able to allow, and what beyond the request I should be able to block it. Most of the companies has their own control. If you already have it, please bind that in your design phase, and ensure that at every product, just go through it, your DOS control, and then say that, hey, what kind of DOS control can enable for this project, and so on. And if you don't have, it is better to develop a DOS attack control. A DOS is nothing but a denial of service, where you have huge amount of requests coming in, and such that the other users who are genuine users who do not get the request served. And that is, a hacker try to bump in such a huge amount of request such that the other genuine users are not being able to use it. By having control in place, you can always throw back a CAPTCHA, or you can say that your user should not have a request for more than X amount of times in 1 second. Usually, say, user can complete a registration in, say, 2 seconds. So, yeah, user should not complete registration more than 3 registration in 2 seconds. Might be a good rule, which if some users have been able to complete it, then always throw back a control like CAPTCHA and so on, then start controlling or monitoring them, saying that where the request is coming at, how the business use case, and so on. This needs to be very well thought in terms of business, and then driven, and then it should be having a flexible mode. That is why we say company-specific DOS attack control is better, because as per the domain and domain opportunities, we can always you can tweak it and so on. The other important is security design review. Not much deep inside it, but please ensure that your design conveys all aspect of security protections. Bind, when you are doing a design review, always bind with the policies and standards and the compliance, such that you should be able to clearly map and say where the gap it is. Ensure that internal threat is well protected. Most of, as I showed, the data is most of the areas people neglect to do this in terms of internal threat. So always when you do a design review, say that, hey, if internal employee is trying to steal the data, hack the data, or breach the data, is it possible, or what level, what kind of traceability we have, or what kind of protection we have. And some of the use cases which has been defined in very early stage, where I've clearly shown you hack taking place and huge amount of loss taking place, as very clear trend saying that they failed to do such kind of protections and so on. Ensure policies, ensure your environment and loggings are appropriate and maintained, because the other way in which you are seeing a data is the underneath of your system, and underneath of your system is a log, where any leak of data is also a very huge breach. Okay, always ensure that what environment you are trying to test, what is the log it is trying to produce it, and what is the access, who is having access to the log, and what kind of data we have seen huge amount of breach, especially in terms of not using a correct environment. As per the PCIDSS standards, there's also a rule saying that no production transaction has to be taking place in a QA environment and so on. So anything on that kind of level of breach is also a breach. Okay, because any transaction you do, if you connect your production environment, your QA, and start doing a transaction, a log which is going to get formed is going to get access to everyone. So any credential you are using, it will be able to accessible in those labs and so on. So the various breach have been taken place. So ensure that when you do a design review, these factors been well maintained. The other important tool is threat modeling. Most of the people think that threat modeling is something a difficult tool or a difficult methodology to do it. Threat modeling is not such. It depends on what kind of methodology you use in threat modeling. To understand more what is threat modeling is a process of accessing and documentation of a system security risk during a design phase. In a design phase, assess what is your security risk and say where you are weak and where you can immediately start protecting, and bind them with various activities or task or a bug or however you want to drag it home. One of the best model, which with my experience, which I've worked it out, is Microsoft EOP is a threat model. It's a threat model which is like a card game. Nothing very much complex. It is very easy to run around it. I have tried it in various organizations and seen that it is being flexibly able to run around it. And it is a simple game, and you get everything from Microsoft. This is a part and parcel of Microsoft secure development life cycles. So once you follow threat modeling, you will be also following a part of secure development life cycles model. And in order to know what is exactly this threat modeling, there is a link provided here. It's an amazing video from Microsoft. It's just a 6 minutes video or 7 minutes video, which clearly they enact a play in order to show how threat modeling is being conducted and so on. So that will very clearly show you that threat modeling is not something tough or something to be made. And they also give you a clear card deck in order to, since the EOP is nothing but a card game kind of activity. They give you a card deck which is a PDF on this one. You can always print it. You can play as a card game which has been prescribed by EOP, or you can tweak that with respect to your company and start playing the threat modeling. Threat modeling will give you an enormous amount of findings, especially because you will be able to correlate with your design as well as your vulnerability and issue. Then you can ask yourself a question saying that, hey, if this is what a hacker mode, what kind of flow can be breachable and so on. And usually it can be done with a basic designs and with a basic card. And if you go through this video, you'll be able to also see that it's not only meant that you should have a best of architecture in place. You can always have your development team and a QA team and a security engineer who knows about vulnerability and so on. Then together can work and play in terms of threat modeling, and you can get huge amount of it. There are other type of threat modeling also, risk and risk management. This is also other methods, but I would highly preferably say EOP is the best out of it. The next important dimension is development. In the development, secured code scanning is very, very important stage, and doing a code review with respect to security is the next stage, and developing a checklist kind of it which can provide you to avoid any kind of breach, and an early stage of coding and can also help you. The slide here shows a study done by Vericode saying that, hey, different languages, what are different kind of vulnerability found and what is the percentage of it? And you can see that most of the languages has very high percentage in terms of cross-site scripting. Java, it has been termed to be somewhere around 57 and so on, and similarly 62% in terms of it, and in terms of C++. So it's very clear to say that you use any languages or any kind. Okay, vulnerability is very common, and most of these vulnerabilities have been coming in because we are not being properly getting to data validation. So data validation, more and more you follow the best practice of data validation in development will give you very clear pictures. So it's not to say that only by using an X language your breach is more and so on, but most of the languages have a high breach, especially in terms of cross-site scripting and so on. So when we start with secure code scanning, we have huge amount of open source. Again, from OAuth's, just go ahead to OAuth's website. You can find huge amount of open source which are there, which can protect it in different manner in terms of your code scanning. Some of them are good, like find bugs, where you can provide a rule and start working on it. And these open source are easily flexible to re-relate in terms of your own domain specific, and then start enhancing it. By having such kind of code scanning, you can also have better control of your code. And there is also many commercial-based tools like IBM App Scans and Vericode and code analysis. So if the company is able to invest on it, you should be able to get certain tools such that we can protect it in a very early development phase. So use of multiple tool is a good thing because there might be many vulnerabilities which is newly published, which is not there. So one or other tool might be able to catch it out, and some tools might be vulnerable by itself. So please, when you select a tool, please be careful that you choose the tool from the well-reputed source. So most of the tools which has been given from OAuth's are well-known and well-accredited tools of open source, which has been able to do it. By doing a multiple tool scanning, you will be able to leverage some of the best practices of one tool to other. So that in that way, you may get better strength and so on. Some of the advantage when you talk about open source is you can develop a wrapper around it, customized to your business and so on. Of course, it's a cost benefit. But disadvantages, you cannot find the latest vector. A false alarm rate will be high, so please be ready to face those challenges. When you talk about commercial tools, the vector management, just to recollect, vector is nothing but a trick at which your vulnerability can be hacked. Vector managements are usually better. Most of the systems has better vector management when you come to commercial tool, and they do a frequent update and so on. And they have a standard report in place, and they have a report with respect to compliance, and they can update the compliances with respect to it and so on. So if you have a compliance change, they have their own complaints, change impact updates, which you can. When you come to open source, that will not be there, so you might need to be tuned by yourself and so on. But with respect to commercial tool, of course, cost base is there. Customization depends on what is a tool, what is what kind of source base you have, and so on. So customizing difficulties based on a skill of a tool and also skill of the person and so on. And integration challenges, some of them they give you huge amount of API and plugins, and those plugins depends on what kind of plugins you have it in your system. So those challenges will be there when you talk about your commercial based tool. Coming to the testing phase, so one important which I can emphasize on testing phases is always have some kind of pen testing sign off. Pen testing is very, very important. So testing in various aspects of pen testing is important. So some of the basic structure of pen testings are testing for vulnerability trends. So if you have your own company trends, bind your company trend and then say that, hey, at least I should test for this company trends. Of course, testing for a complaints test is very important, because I know if you are an e-commerce based or commercial based, PCIDSS is a basic complaints you will come into approach. And if you are health related, definitely HIPA and so on. Test in terms of log and log access. Testing in terms of authentication and authorization is very important. Test with respect to business logic. How can you breach your business logic? Because most of the hackers try to breach your business logic and try to do it. And you can also test in terms of hijack and web services if you're exposing your web services outside, or if you're having a huge amount of hijacks calls, which doing major functionalities. Test with respect to hijacks is explicitly might also be able to help it. When we do all this kind of pen testing and sign off, you know always your product requires change and the product has to be enhanced and so on. So doing a regressions on those areas, your pen testing automation will also able to help. And also please plan for pen test automation, because more and more the vulnerability comes in and so on, and the vectors are there. Only the automation might be able to sophisticate your time and effort-based activities, because manually testing against for all vulnerability for all vectors is a real to impossible state. So more and more you leave any of the vector might be in breach, which might cause any kind of a big impact what you're seeing there. Some of the testing tools, so these are testing tools specifically meant for testing. Web Scrub, they have latest versions also released which can do a huge amount of testing. Testing can be done specifically in terms of SSL, or you can do a testing with respect to a cookie. You can also do a testing with respect to ops, top 10 and so on. Testing can also be done specifically with respect to technologies like Flash and so on. So ops, Flash Fire Introducer is one of the tool. And if you're using a commercial-based tool, there are a huge amount of commercial-based tool. Sensic is one of the tool which we have extensively played around it, which gives the various amount of testing and so on. White Hat is one of other kind where we have also played around it and so on. AppScan and HV Web Inspect. Of course, deciding on open source and commercial-based tool will have an advantage and disadvantages as stated previously. But in terms of having combination of both will also be able to help you to increase your testing capabilities and so on. Coming to the last dimension is dimension of regression. This is where most of the people see that, hey, what for a security do you need regression and so on. Please remember, security, once it is protected, it doesn't mean to say that it is protected forever. For any change in your product will also impact your security levels. So regressing in terms of security is very, very important. So in terms of that, having a pen test automation will be able to help you. And if you're able to do a continuous integrations with respect to the pen testing, will also be able to help you a lot. Because having a continuous integration, any changes will be able to get tested automatically, and that will be able to give you. So if you are planning for dimensions, always target that you should be able to end up in doing a continuous integration of security as well. And that way you should be able to enhance your level of your product and so on. 90% of a commercial-based tool support periodic runs, so you can leverage that in terms of continuous integration. If you are using open source, most of the tools, one or other way, they have a way to integrate with Hudson and Jenkins.